Imagine yourself the trustee of something called an ecological corporation or an environmental corporation, or just abbreviated E-Corp. What would that be? Well, there actually is such a thing, and the idea came from Mark Donovan with a company called EWABI in Bali, Indonesia. And EWABI makes bamboo bicycles. Some or all of them are electric powered. Now that is a pretty environmental compatible kind of business, and that's his intent. And he came up with the idea of an environmental corporation. So maybe this is a vehicle to take us from the current kind of economy into a different kind of world, economic, social, and otherwise. Well, a lot of us are familiar with things we don't like or what's wrong with business and the economy today. It's too short term. We're forced to think too much about the money. And maybe we can't totally escape that, but how do you think way beyond it? Well, a trustee has to think about the far future. Somebody that's running a business is all too often constrained to think very short term, big business or small. And even as individuals are subject to it. If you don't have much money, you're looking for where do I get my next dollar so I can buy what I think I need, including maybe food. And in many ways, we are slaves to our own consumption or overconsumption because we got a lot of debt to try to pay for this. And there are all kinds of statistics on this, but let's move on. What are the deep questions that ought to be provoked? Well, number one is, what do we measure? Well, it's not necessarily the money. What we would measure is how much energy we use, what's our return on energy, how much material do we use, especially that which comes raw, can we recycle most of it? How do we influence the world outside ourselves? This is a fundamental change from how much can we get from the world that does something for us to fundamentally saying, how do we interact with the world and leave it, the environment, the ecology, a better place than when we began? That's different. And Mark actually has an idea of not only being neutral, maybe he can make the environment better. That's different. Sometimes that's called regeneration. And we have a lot of talk about a regenerative economy. We don't have enough talk about what would that fundamentally mean grassroots level. Mark's on that path. If you were a trustee of an E-corporation, what would you think about and what would be your major concerns? And that shifts us from short-term thinking to long-term, from maybe even thinking that democracy is cheap gas and plenty of money, to an era of true responsibility, that we are responsible for the earth and we need to take care of it. And that's a fundamental shift in business thinking from the get-go. We're struggling to get past that. Maybe you can help us figure out how the idea of an E-corporation can enable us to get our thinking from here to wherever it needs to go.